Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. We have an update with TriStar Gold. With me, I have Nick Appleyard, CEO, Andrew Grant, VP Sustainability, and Marcus Brewster, COO, and of course, Magda, my colleague, who's going to help with some of the questions. This session today specifically deals with the news release that came out on October 1st. We thought it would be a good idea to give a bit more context to that, as well as allow investors the opportunity to ask some questions. So if you're unfamiliar with TriStar and you'd like to know more about the company, I would recommend checking out one of the videos on our YouTube channel that goes more into the details of the story, because this really is a focused session. With that out of the way, thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today. I think you're going to give us a brief presentation.
Yep, that's right. I'll just run through the very high level on the company, just in case there's someone who doesn't know the story, but then we will focus in on the October 1st press release issues that came up and give what information we can related to that.
I did forget to reference forward-looking statements, which this session will contain. If anyone would like to know more about those, they can find them on the company presentation on the website. Sorry about that, Nick.
No, that's right. I'll get it as well. So
I had one job.
All right. Okay. Thanks everyone for joining us today. As I said, I will flick through just the first couple of slides of our deck. Most of you will be familiar, but in case there's someone who's not, they can get the high level view of what the company is, what we're doing, where we are. But as Deborah said, probably today more than normal, we take care of the disclaimers. We're going to be trying to give you what guidance and what knowledge we have of this current issue of the Ministry of Publico and their recommendations. But a lot of it's out of our control, so we will be trying to be as open and transparent as possible. But there's no guarantees that we can accomplish what we hope to with these issues going on. So just a quick high-level view. I mean, we had this press release come out on October 1st stating the Ministry of Public is recommending the suspension of our license in a non-binding recommendation. I don't want people to think that Brazil is a bad place or that Pará is a bad state for mining. This slide that we've had in our deck for a little while now shows the mines that have been built and developed in the last couple of years, and Brazil is booming in a development, mine development sort of manner. G Mining, who are only a couple of 100 kilometers up the road in the same state, same jurisdiction as us, been doing really well with TZ. Hochschild Mining with Mara Rosa are now in full production. Ero Copper have been a standout company for a while, and Tucumã has been built recently and moving forward. And as with Aura Minerals, they've been a great company building mines and developing mines in Brazil at this scale, medium scale, mid-tier level mines. So Brazil is still very much a really good place to work. These little road bumps come along the way and you have to deal with them. And that's what we're doing. But, Brazil is still very, very much open for business as a mining jurisdiction. Just a very quick overview of Castelo de Sonhos. So we have a large resource, 1.8 million ounces of indicated resources and an additional 700,000 ounces of inferred resources. With that as a base, we moved into a pre-feasibility study, which we published in October 2021, with a base case gold price of 1,550. And as you can see, we got really robust or outstanding economic returns. And for a very simple, shallow open pit gold mine, and low impact mine, I think that's really important to state at this point because it comes into the later conversations. Here you can see we environmentally clean. We have no sulfides. We have very simple metallurgy, and of course these resources are still very much open at depth along strike for new discoveries. So the project is pretty young in its mine life as well. So we did get that LP permit in August, and we still have it right now, as today. I think people don't understand sometimes all the work that goes into getting these permitted projects, and that's why there are so very, very few of them. I mean, it's not just some drilling, get some assays, get a gold resource, and then move forward and get your permit. There's a massive amount of work, different disciplines, required, different teams required. Investment required from groups like Oromet and Royal Gold, who do due diligence on you on all aspects, not just the technical, on the permittability of it as well. Look at the region, look at, can you get this thing done? And that's all of the components that you have to complete before you can get a permitted multi-million ounce deposit. So we've done that, we've got all of that, and this project has ticked all the boxes and continues to tick all the boxes as far as we're concerned as a project that will be built sometime here in the near future. So we said we had that pre-feasibility study. Here's just the high-level results. Most of you will be aware of this. Just in case there's some new people on, we have 1.4 million ounces of reserves. Average production is about 120,000 ounces a year. So it makes it a mid-tier size gold mine. It is shallow, open pits, very traditional technology, diggers, small trucks, and as I said, great economics. And as you look at today's gold price of whatever it is today, 2,600, even better than what we're showing here. So it's a stellar project. It really is. It's in a development corridor near the highway, and it's one that's going to be built, and it's just getting stronger and stronger right now. So we will jump right to the nub of the matter here. Is we put a press release out on October 1st. I've cribbed the exact text from the press release there on the left. Basically, the Ministerial Publico are the sort of federal prosecutors who check on the processes and action of government in Brazil. Published a letter to their website that we became aware of, and stating they're recommending the suspension of our license for a number of different, not infractions is the wrong word, but irregularities in the process run by the regulators that they think should have been run or should have been run differently, or components they believe should have been included. These recommendations are non-binding, but they can, the public prosecutor can then take different actions if the regulators do not agree with them. So the new information I'm showing you here is all already public, but we haven't put it in a press release before, and so I think it is important today to have a look at this map on the right-hand side of the screen. The red outline you can see in the bottom is basically the heart of where the mining project is proposed to be in our pre-feasibility study. That's the direct area we're going to be working in. The pits, the plant, tailings dam, are all in that little area there. The boundaries on the right-hand side, the purple one and this sort of yellow one moving up there, I don't know if I can, that's all right, are boundaries on the edge of Indigenous protection areas. What is worth pointing out, and what we want to point out, is that the blues obviously are the rivers coming away and drainage is running away from our project. Everything from the project flows straight and nearly due north. So that's the way all the impacts run. And what we've done and what we're required to do by law and what the regulators are required to do by law is look at the way your impacts might get to any area. I mean, it's not just Indigenous. If we were going to impact the town of Castelo de Sonhos, which you can actually see is to the southwest of us, and the town there, we would need to look at that and go, hey, what potential impact are we going to have there? Obviously, there's nothing runs in that direction from us. But we did look to the north and see how far in a hypothetical worst case scenario, our impacts might go if there was a disaster scenario, and that's the way you analyze these projects. We don't anticipate them. Everything is designed to stand up to any of these worst case scenarios, but you also have to look at what happens if it doesn't. And effectively, the dark blue area there shows the furthest distance under a worst case scenario that we believe the impacts from the project could possibly reach. And you're still in a straight line, 27.5 kilometers short of the boundary to the Indigenous populations. So it's a long way for any impact to ever get to, and that's in an absolute, in a worst case scenario situation. The boundaries to the Indigenous populations are a bit closer. They're about 25 kilometers to us, due east of us, but there are hills across there. There is no drainage in that direction. The prevailing wind blows from them to us. Yes, so from east to west, so that we don't even have dust blowing over from them towards them. It blows the other direction. So there's no impact in that direction either. So, there's a few different ways we measure these impacts with the Indigenous groups, and every time we've looked at it ourselves, with our consultants, with the regulators, we're nowhere near the boundaries. I mean, and it's not like we're sort of just coming up to them. We're a long way short. So we do feel very, very strong that this project is a really well-designed project and designed not to fail and not to have any impact outside of the immediate pit and plant and dam area. And that's what we would anticipate. But in the case of a worst case scenario, then there'd still be no impact into any Indigenous reserves and into any population areas. So I think that's really important, because what the Ministry Public are really pushing for is the inclusion of the Indigenous groups in all of our work, studies into their areas, studies of the impacts into their areas. And it just doesn't seem to make sense to us, and we don't really understand the logic behind it, which is obviously why the regulators didn't ask us to do it. And we haven't done it. We have engaged with those groups, we've spoken with them, but the formal studies are quite intensive and haven't been undertaken, and I don't think there will be. So the hard thing here to guide everyone on is what happens next. I'm sure there's going to be questions. Now, hopefully I won't preempt them too much with vague answers, but I do want to let everyone know now at this point, ahead of answering questions, we don't have a lot of answers yet. So if I answer, or Andrew or Marcus answers that we just don't know, it's because this is all very new. Like we said, we found out a day or so before October 1st. We're in information gathering. We haven't had any meetings with SEMAS yet. We haven't had any meetings with the public prosecutors yet. We will be. We're anticipating that, and that's one of our jobs, is to get those meetings. But when they happen, we don't know. So please be patient with us if we don't have an answer. If we say we don't know, we are giving you the best information we have available. And so I think that's probably it from me. I mean, really, for us, the path forward is get to the meetings with SEMAS, the prosecutors, the different agencies, find out really what they're after, and make sure they're fully informed as to who we are, that we're a serious mining company, that we are not, maybe there's some idea that they may be confusing us with garimpos in the region. Make sure they understand we're doing things very, very correctly. Make sure they understand we have the very good support from the communities, and hopefully show them that we have no impact, and we're not even close to having an impact into these regions. That the Indigenous, and I think I can talk for all the board when we want to protect those Indigenous areas and those Indigenous peoples as much as anybody does. So we wouldn't have any impact in there, and we wouldn't move ahead with a design that allowed any impact in there. So we want to make sure we can relay that message as strongly as we can to the public prosecutors. I could keep talking for a while, but I think it's probably best to just move into questions here. I think that's probably the way to best inform people from this point.
All right. Thank you, Nick. So just to start off with some audience questions, are you able to summarize what exactly, if you're able to, the main concerns and reasons for this opposition would be?
We believe the main concern is all related to the Indigenous population and prior consultation with them. And they want to make sure that's happened in a very formal way. There are other things they've raised in there, but they seem minor and a lot easier to deal with, and maybe incidental, maybe downplaying them too much, but maybe not as well. So, but it does seem to be that the main issues relate to the Indigenous communities. And we did see that, in a similar time frame, some infrastructure projects were given these similar letters, or the agencies were given similar letters related to infrastructure projects, which makes you realize makes you think this isn't an anti-mining campaign, but it is a pro-Indigenous campaign, because they had the Indigenous component study requests in their letters as well. It might be a good idea now, I'm just having a quick look at a couple of things. If I ask Marcus to actually explain the role and who the Ministry Public is and how these prosecutors work, he has a much better understanding than I do. And I think that's probably a good starting point ahead of some of these questions. Would that be okay, Magda? Okay, Marcus, can you just give everyone a quick overview of the Ministry of Publico and their role and how they're set up?
Sure. So they're basically the federal prosecutor's office. So they're an independent part of the justice system in Brazil, and it forms part of the Federal Attorney General's office, the MPU. And its main function is really defending society's interests and ensuring compliance with the Constitution and the laws. And it has a number of roles, but more relevant to us is, I suppose, defense of human and collective rights, and that's where their concern about the indigenous groups comes in, and also control of public administration. The Ministério Público Federal monitors other government agencies, public bodies. They look into corruption, acts of administrative crimes, and the actual recommendation to suspend the license was obviously made to SEMAS, our environmental regulator. So this is part of their purview to keep an eye on other government and state departments, essentially. So I think the nearest comparison in the United States is probably the public prosecutor's office. I'm from Britain. We don't really have anything that can be compared to it. But that's essentially, in a nutshell, what the Ministério Público does.
Okay, thanks. Got next question, Magda, for us?
Sorry. Thank you. So can you give us a bit of an overview of like the studies you've done to date? Like, were these indigenous communities consulted, and what that process looked like to get to the LP?
We have contacted with them. We've spoke with them. They were invited to our public hearing. So they attended our public hearing, and they were both met with by us and by the regulators at the public hearing, and I believe hosted respectfully and professionally. So we have engaged with them at that level. We know who they are. There's been contact several times with them. And I think that's not the issue. The issue is there is a very formal process they want us to step into, which is very time consuming and very expensive. And and has a set of parameters that really guide when you need to do that. We don't come close to meeting those parameters. So, the level of engagement we have with them, inviting them to the public process, making sure they're informed about the project, seems a suitable way to be interacting with them at this time. Especially because we have no impact with them, and we have a lot of people a lot closer who, are supportive of the project and are more potentially impacted by the project that we need to be dealing with.
Okay, thank you. And then we have another audience questions. Do we have an agreement with those indigenous communities?
No, we have no agreements with them.
Okay, thank you. And then can you give us a quick overview of how the studies to date completed are a little bit different than the additional studies requested by the prosecutor?
Like I said, regarding indigenous communities, it's been sort of a direct interaction, either through their agents, through representatives of them, or direct with them. Them coming to our public hearing, being fully informed about the project through that process. So it's more of a, I guess they were dealt with or treated as respectfully as all of the people in the region are. And I think we have a very good community support because we are very open with our information and hopefully very respectful with the people who allow us and host us in their country and in their region. So these are one of the groups that are in that category, so they get treated with respect and informed along with everybody else. The difference with the Indigenous component study would be it's a federally sort of mandated study that the company would in some ways maybe not have total control over the scope and the timing and the cost of. That sort of falls outside of it, it falls into the federal agencies and how they decide to run it. And that's always, for a small company, a little bit of a scary thing. If you have a study, someone says you have to do this now, and by the way, this is how you're going to do it, this is how long it's going to take you, this is how much it's going to cost you. It may be something that just becomes unrealistic and that isn't practical for us.
Thank you. And then just last question from me before I hand it over to Deborah. Are you able to specify how far the project is from the Indigenous community's border?
Yeah, I mean, we have, if I can pull that last slide back up, we can look, from, I'm trying to think, yeah. So what we have on this map here is we're showing that we're like 27.5 kilometers from what we see as our worst case scenario downstream impact, like under a catastrophe situation. I don't actually have offhand the actual distance. I mean, so you're probably 50 kilometers away straight line to the northern boundary, which is the way the impacts run. And again, that's a straight line. We've had a look at a lot of the different ways of measuring it. If you actually do it as river kilometers, if you're traveling down there, it's approximately double that. So you might be looking at 80, 90, 100 kilometers of river distance. To the impacts to the north, that's the way the impacts from the project would flow. To the east, you're still talking about a 25, 27 kilometers to the boundary there, but with no impacts running in that direction because everything slopes down towards the river as you would expect it to. So they're the distances that we're dealing with. And just so we don't forget, because the people in the village of Castelo de Sonhos is very important to us. On this map, it's a little hard to see, but the bottom left-hand corner is the village of Castelo de Sonhos, and you can see that straight line, that's probably only 10, 15 kilometers from us. So they're the closest people to us, and there's about 15,000 people there that we appreciate and also keep fully informed of the project and deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you.
So I've got a couple of questions, Nick.
Yep.
So what happens now? Does SEMAS or do any other government agencies need to respond to these requests?
That falls a little bit into my early guidance of we don't completely know. We haven't had a meeting with SEMAS and the other agencies yet. The way it seems to be written, it's a recommendation. I would presume a recommendation. You have a choice of accepting it, rejecting it, or ignoring it. And I believe that's what we understand at this case. This time is that's the options in front of the regulators. Obviously, we don't want them to ignore it. We would like them to review their situation, and if they still agree with the work they've done, which we believe it was good work, so that would be the case that we would be hoping for, is that they go put a good explanation forth as to why the decisions were made and move forward with a response saying, no, we stand by our situation, but we have no knowledge of what they will do and sometimes the etiquette behind the scenes of what has to happen. So that's something we're still learning.
And is there an anticipated timeline for response and clarity on next steps?
Not that we're aware of, no, we don't have any. I mean, obviously we've got things we're pushing for everything yesterday, but pushing government regulators and these these prosecutors it's an unknown issue. You sort of hopefully we get in for meetings very quickly and people listen and common sense prevails, but we really just this is really true. We just don't know.
And do you have any idea what a response would look like? Would it be an official statement to all parties involved?
No, I don't know. Sorry, at this point, I believe it would be a response from the SEMAS to the Ministry of Publico. But we haven't, like I said, because we're not part of the process. It's Ministry of Publico to the regulators. We're not part of the internal machinations. We haven't received anything ourselves, so we're not privy to that information.
And an audience question, what if SEMAS responds to the public prosecutor that this project does not need such a study because of the remoteness of the community?
And it's a highly possible response. Then the public prosecutor, from the best of my knowledge, has the option of accepting that and saying, okay, yep, now we understand the situation, we agree with you, we're all good. Or but then because they don't have the authority to force SEMAS to do anything, their recourse, if they don't agree, is through the court system.
Okay. And
Probably
then,
a good time if I could bring Andrew in and to answer a question, just to say, because I know a lot of
yeah,
these questions are on guiding us around a similar area. Andrew, can you give people a bit of a guide on like what we're doing in country to deal with this, to prepare ourselves as a team? I mean, you know, there are no hard answers that we've got, unfortunately, but there's a lot of stuff we can be doing to prepare. So do you want to give people a quick update on that?
Oh, certainly, Nick, and welcome everybody, and thank you for all these questions. So as a management team, it's pretty early in our journey to finding a solution to mitigating the concerns of the Ministerio Publico at this moment. But here's sort of a sense of the priority steps on the critical path from TriStar's perspective. So we're going to be gathering and completing a review of any technical reports that got generated by the Ministerio Publico to kind of support or underscore that recommendation letter to the regulators. Obviously, we're maintaining daily contact with all of our key regulators to ensure an alignment of their response to the concerns and the technical questions that were raised in the recommendation letter. We'll be meeting with the public prosecutor herself to continue to demystify the company and the project, clarify any concerns that she has from a technical perspective, and also to continue to respond to potential inconsistencies or mistakes that may be present in that recommendation letter, as well as gauge the potential for a negotiated settlement. Obviously, our responsibility as well as a management team is to continue to monitor local sentiment in Castelo de Sonhos, in Esperanza 4, in Altamira, and engage with key local stakeholders and thought leaders daily to answer their questions and concerns and maintain a really high level of transparency, as we have done since day one, which is what's earned us this social license. We're also going to continue to meet with business organizations, public representatives, bureaucrats, and media at the state, federal, and municipal levels to ensure there's no misunderstandings about the impacts of the project. And ultimately, the goal is to help the prosecutor stand down from her request to have our LP suspended and develop any agreements that are necessary to ensure that any concerns around transparency will continue to be addressed at all levels of project development, so that our team on the ground can continue working on developing the feasibility study and advancing the project through the next stages of permitting.
Motion detected at the front door.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So I have a couple questions here from the audience. One of them is, there seems to be 7 to 8 issues. Can you provide a breakdown of how many are minor and how many are major? And for the major ones, what are the remedial options that you're looking at?
I mean, the bottom line, if they come up with an issue, however minor, if it suspends the permit, it's a major issue. So I think we're taking everything very seriously. Although it does seem that a lot of the Ministry Public, the Indigenous component study does seem to be the elephant in the room that is the biggest issue out there. A lot of the other ones, there's probably breaking down into a couple of different areas. One is maybe discussions that the government are having about at what level permitting should take place for projects. There, I believe, is some discussions, or maybe even a court case in Brasilia about, mining projects need to be published or permitted at the state level. They can't send stuff down to the township level. So there's a little bit of that in there. With us, the township effectively helps us and permits our drilling programs and things like that. They don't permit the big mining company. So that's where, as Andrew said, you want to meet with them and demystify and say, no, the township just works with us for the drilling program permits and stuff like that. The mining project is all done in Belém, in the state capital. So there's quite a few elements that relate to that sort of procedural issues internal within the government. And then beyond that, the other sort of issues relate to, obviously potential impacts of the project. Some of it seems to be maybe conflating the LP with the LI. and the pre-feasibility study with a final feasibility study. When the LP was issued to us, they're issued with a set of conditions that you need to meet before you can get your LI, and some of those relate to more detailed studies, or a lot of it's adding detail to what we had at the pre-feasibility level, or additional studies that they want you to do before they will grant you the LI. So quite a few of them fall into that level as well, where in our mind, and I think in the regulators' mind, that the issues were dealt with, because they said, okay, you can't build this until you've done these studies. It doesn't mean you have to have them done now. When you're doing your FS, you need to increase the detail on these studies. I'm trying to think of it. An example, maybe exhaust fumes from the gold room. It's a detailed thing. Every single gold mine around the world has a gold room, has a furnace in there, has some exhaust coming out of it, and you need to be able to show what's going to come out of that. We probably didn't do that at the pre-feasibility study level, but it's probably in there as something that needs to be done before you can actually build the mine. So I think that's probably the two different categories that the other things fall into. And I think when we meet with the prosecutor, and we'll be able to talk through a lot of those, and hopefully a lot of them will just sort of go, oh yeah, that makes sense, that goes away, and we'll see if there's anything left at that point. You're muted, Deborah.
Sorry about that. Another audience question for you. Is the lack of a contingency plan for the tailings dam a major issue? If so, what are the main options to mitigate this?
It's not an issue at all. No.
Okay. And then
no, the tailings dam has been, it's worth mentioning, when we did the pre-feasibility study in the middle of COVID, there were some challenges to doing that. And and so you had to cut corners, is the wrong sense, but we had to be, there were challenges in getting parts of it done. But we made sure that things like the tailings dam and the resource model and the flow sheet of the plant were all done to the absolute highest possible level. So our tailings dam had a team working on it between Denver, London, and Johannesburg, and obviously into Brazil, of the best experts around the world we could find. So it hasn't been questioned. It's been reviewed in detail, and it hasn't been questioned, and it shouldn't be. It's a very well-designed tailings dam, so that doesn't seem to be an issue.
Okay, and is one of the conditions in the LP a detailed indigenous study?
No, it's not.
Okay, and I have a question that I don't understand, so I'm going to ask the audience member if they can rephrase it, unless you understand, Nick, which is, so if this study is not feasible, what does that mean?
Okay, yep, I can see, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's referring to the indigenous study, and really it's not about being feasible, not feasible. It's about impacts and and how you deal with that, and what sort of arrangements you would have with the indigenous people and the reserve for that impact. And if they're going to share in the risk of the project, they would. It's logical they would share in the impact, in the benefit of the project. If I had someone was building something really big next door to me, and they said, "Well, it might collapse on your house," I'm going to want paying for that risk. So that's really what it is. It would be the studies, the indigenous component studies would likely end in some form of agreement between the mine and the indigenous groups who would potentially be impacted. But as we say, we've looked at it every which way we can, and it's not just us internally. It's our consultants and the regulators, and no one can see an impact even getting close to the indigenous studies, the areas, which is why a long, very expensive study doesn't make sense when there's no impact.
Got it. And one more audience question here. You mentioned that the mine is simple and environmentally safe. So what are the risks?
What are the risks from an environmental standpoint? I mean, really, we've done, mining risks are generally, like in the mine and the waste rock and that, and the spent ore, your risks are usually ARD related and heavy metal related. We have none of that at all. We have no sulfide. We have no other metals in the property, so there's no risk from that side of it at all. The plant, obviously, we are using very low strength cyanide followed by cyanide destruction. So in theory, if there was a something happened to the plant, but that would be very intense in a very local area and wouldn't cause an environmental issue long term or distal to the project. So you're back to the tailings dam. I mean, if something happened to the tailings dam, and this is how we look at what's the worst thing that could happen. And this is where we had that map earlier where I showed, okay, the worst thing that could happen that we can consider, you're still 27.5 kilometers from the Indigenous boundary on the border. And that would just be fluid, and maybe some sediment from the dam, but it wouldn't be toxic at all in any way getting down there. So it really is. And that's a lot of this, we'd like to take credit for having designed a super clean, super environmentally friendly mine. But a lot of it is, I do have to say, by the pure nature of this deposit. There's just no sulfides in it. There's no other metals that allows us to use, that means that the ARD, the acid rock generation drainage, is not an issue. There's no other metals in it, so you're not going to contaminate water systems with heavy metals. Because of that, we get to use very low strength cyanide, followed by cyanide destruction, so that, and cyanide itself is not, it's a poison, but it's not really a major environmental long-term concern because it breaks down in the environment. So it's, you're really down to that immediate downstream of the dam if something goes wrong with the dam. But as I said, so we put our full focus and the best possible global team that we could onto that dam to make sure that it is the best dam we could make. I would like to add as well, just on that topic, I've done studies in, various countries around the world, and, the team we've had working on this is by far the best I've ever worked with. I mean, everybody's bought into building the best possible project from the three of us here. I think all of the staff at the project, the consultants even seem to be bought in and working with us and really want this to go ahead as a great mine, So I've never felt an energy like it within a company and within a project for it to be developed. So this one will happen, and I think this will be a road bump that'll go away,
Do you have a sense of how the local community views these recent requests?
Andrew, do you want to fill that one?
Yes. The communities of Castelo de Sonhos and Esperanza Cuatro are extremely supportive of this project. When they saw the news a few days ago through our existing communication channels, we started to get a number of questions, not unlike the questions coming from this group of investors right now. They wanted to clarify, what's the status of the project and why is this happening? So our team's been working with the local stakeholders and leaders to help them understand, as best we understand, what's happening, what the process will be. The community, I don't speak for them, of course. I can say that the leadership across the communities has expressed fulsome support for the project and are curious about how they can support us in terms of defending the project and speaking up for the project. So we're very grateful, of course, for the robust support of the community. At this point, as Nick has mentioned, as a company, we're still very much in a process of gathering information, understanding the nature of the process, and understanding how we can work closely with our regulators and with the public prosecutor to understand what ultimately is going to provide the right solution so this project can move forward quickly. I think you're still on mute, Heather.
You'd think it was my first time. Have these recent requests impacted the company's near-term focus? And can you give us an update on what preparations for a feasibility study are underway?
Okay, so it's two parts. The near-term focus, yeah, I mean, it's impacted it, and this has become the full near-term focus right now. Everything hinges on clearing the path here and getting over this bump in the road. And then what's the other part of the question? The preparations for feasibility study?
Correct, yeah.
I mean, we're sort of ready. I mean, the first part of the feasibility study would be, 20-odd thousand meters of drilling. So we've, that's ready to go when we are almost, so we just got to get this out of the way, make sure we have the money in place and get that started. So yeah, beyond that, we would be, it's such a simple project that it's really just making more detail on the resource, more detail on the process, more detail on the dam, more detail on the infrastructure. I mean, there's nothing else really to do.
Do you have any drilling plan for the year?
For next year, we have plans and desires to do a lot of drilling. If I let Marcus talk now, he'll talk for about an hour. No, we do. We obviously want to do that 20-odd thousand meters of infill, plus we would love to do another 3,000 to 5,000 meters of exploration upside potential drilling if we can. That would be that's what we'd love to do. We just got to get through this and get it done.
With 300 million shares out already, how do you plan to manage dilution to raise funds for feasibility and drilling and other things?
Again, it's what we're working through now, so we don't have a hard answer on that. That's why I think we need to, this public prosecutors, I sort of feel it as a bit like a cloud over the company in some ways, even though we believe in our position very well and we believe we can clear that, we can deal with it and move on. We have to actually do that, and then as soon as we can do that, there'll be we should be a recovery in the share price, which will allow us to raise the money and control dilution.
One final question from me is, are there any updates on the partnership process that you could share, and has this impacted that?
Yeah, the last part, has it impacted that? I mean, very logically, yes. I think if anybody looking at us is going to want to, see us get beyond the information gathering phase we're in now and get to sort of the first contact with SEMAS and with the public prosecutor to really see how this is going to shape out. But, people are still there. It hasn't sent people running to the hills. It's just sort of sent them sort of, okay, let's see how this runs out over the next few weeks here, or a month or so.
That's it for me. I don't see any other audience questions. Is there anything that you wanted to cover today that we didn't get to, or any messaging that you want to get across?
No, I think that's all. We feel, one thing we've done is we have reviewed our position on all of the issues here multiple times now over the last week or so. We don't see an obvious technical weakness. We don't see anything that makes us change our mind on how we should have done anything. So we feel very strong in our position. It's just a matter of how quickly common sense can prevail, really. Yeah, that's all. And we will keep the public informed. As soon as we have, information, we'll put a press release out and then potentially do another webinar afterwards to explain, because these issues are sometimes hard to explain in a sort of a dry format of a press release. But we will keep the public as informed as we can.
Well, I think you've done a good job at transparency so far, Nick. Thanks for taking the time to answer some questions and clarify some of the issues around the press release, etc. If no one else has any questions, I think we can end the session there. If anyone would like to do a call with management, feel free to reach out if you have follow-up questions, etc. And yeah, thanks, Marcus, Nick, and Andrew for taking the time. Hope everyone has a good afternoon.
Thanks a lot, Deborah. Thanks a lot, Magda.
Yeah.